Uh, Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yesterday, I had introduced you to the course. Today, I will try to summarize how culture as an object of study developed in sociology and social anthropology. The first thing which should be kept in mind that sociology is the youngest system of study, system of knowledge, or a science which is not primarily concerned with nature or the physical world. Rather, it is primarily concerned with human beings and their culture. You already know that there is a debate whether sociology is a science like physics, biology, mathematics, geology, or it is part of humanities like history and philosophy, geography, and theology, or it is some sort of social criticism or enlightened common sense. The first view is represented, among others, by the founder of the discipline, Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim. The second view is shared among many others by Max Weber. And the third view is by and large followed by the so-called leftists or the Marxists, although Marx himself regarded his study of society as a science more or less on the same lines in which Saint Simon or Saint Simon and his disciple Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim conceived it. Now, in major universities of India, sociology is treated differently. For example, in Delhi University, they differentiate between sociology and anthropology, whereas anthropology, including social anthropology, is part of the School of Sciences or Faculty of Sciences. And their students are given a degree of MSc in anthropology. Whereas sociology in Delhi University is part of the social sciences and it is taught in Delhi School of Economics campus with economics and geography. Now, Delhi School of Economics was developed in independent India, whereas Delhi University was founded by the British. Of course, when they moved the capital of the British Empire in India from Kolkata to New Delhi, primarily after 1912. Delhi University developed around 1930s. Specific date is difficult to give, as in the case of JNU. JNU was founded by the Act of Parliament in 1969, and the faculty positions were partly filled in 1970, but actual teaching began in 1971-72 batch. In the same way, Delhi University developed between 1930 to 1935, and the Department of Sociology developed around 1952, although the appointments were made in 1950. Then two people joined later on in 51. And finally, in 52, it began functioning as an independent science of society. And by and large, Delhi School of Economics, Department of Sociology, treated social anthropology taught in School of Sciences as a sister discipline, real sister, and the reason was that both the Delhi School of Economics Sociology Department, which was founded by finally M.N. Srinivas, although M.S.A. Rao had joined a little earlier, then Andre Bete joined as a junior lecturer, who did his PhD finally under M.N. Srinivas, who joined from Baroda in 1952. But before Baroda, Srinivas was teaching in Oxford in the School of Oriental and African Studies, and he was a student of A.R. Radcliffe Brown, who claimed to be a follower of Immanuel Durkheim. In the same way, Delhi School of Anthropology, or the Department of Anthropology in Delhi University, it was also claiming the same lineage from Durkheim to Malinowski and A.R. Radcliffe Brown to the contemporary people. Therefore, the first debate, which began in India between four important universities, University of Calcutta, which had started teaching sociology just after the Swadeshi movement in 1906, and Department of Bombay, which was founded in 1919, and the Department of Lucknow, which was founded in 1921, and the Delhi School of Economics, which was founded in 1952. I am talking about the Sociology Department in Delhi School of Economics. And then finally, JNU began teaching sociology in 1971-72. Now, what is common between all these departments? Of course, there are many differences, but what is common thread between all these departments? The major departments, the foundational departments of sociology or study of society in India, and they say that, we do not treat human beings as social animals as other social sciences do. What is the problem in conceptualizing sociology as a science of social animals? then you have to relocate human beings among the animal kingdom, and then you will have to delineate our biological relationship not with our first cousins, you know, the animals of monkey kingdom, general monkey, then chimpanzee, then gorilla, then orangutan, and then human beings. Of course, monkeys are one of the developed social animals in the animal kingdom, but so are ants and elephants, more or less also dogs. Of course, all types of birds which fly, cows, buffaloes, goats, sheep. They are all social animals like us. Therefore, in what way we are different from those who study animal kingdom, namely biologists, psychologists, anthropologists, political scientists, economists, and social historians. Now, as there is a difference between physical anthropology and social or cultural anthropology, in the same way, there are three types of histories. One is political history, second is geographical history, and third is social or cultural history. Now, today it is very difficult to delineate one subject from the other subject because there has been a lot of exchange between these disciplines. But it was not very difficult to differentiate one department from another before the Second World War ended. When the Second World War began, 1939, when it ended, 1945, therefore, I would like to assert, like the founding fathers, that sociology conceptualized itself as a new synthetic science of man and society on planet Earth. And what differentiated sociology was its location between philosophy and history. Now, what is philosophy? Philosophy is primarily a systematic study of man's search for knowledge and meaning. And what is history? History is basically concerned with the past of a particular thing. Therefore, there is animal history. Therefore, there is history of the earth. There is a history of the planet, history of architecture, history of buildings, which is usually called architecture, and planning. But what is sociology? Sociology is neither as general as philosophy, nor it is as particular as history. Therefore, in history, you talk about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, the American Revolution or the American War of Independence, the White Revolution, the Green Revolution, and the yellow revolution. In other words, we are dealing with particular revolutions and their past, that is history. But in sociology, we try to compare and contrast all revolutions and we try to understand, social revolution in empirical context. Now, our empirical study has something to do with history, but our conceptual apparatus is more or less like philosophy. Therefore, as Robert Merton said, we are primarily interested in middle range theories of society and culture, economy and polity, science and religion. Middle range theory. What is middle range? History is, primarily concerned with particular datum or data, whereas philosophy is primarily concerned with grand theories. Are you getting the point? Instead, sociology concentrates on the middle ground, on the middle range. It is both empirical and theoretical, empirical and conceptual at the same time, simultaneously. We are at the same time empirical and we are doing empirical study by using general concepts developed by our theoretical masters. Got it? Now, what is unique about sociology which other social scientists lack? It is the study of family, marriage, and culture. Economists are primarily concerned with the economic aspect of society or human life. Political scientists are primarily concerned with the political life or political institutions. But we sociologists are primarily studying human culture through cultural institutions like family, marriage, kinship, in the wider sense of the term. In the wider sense of the term. For example, take the institution of family. What is family? What is family? Very difficult to give a preliminary definition of family in a heterogeneous class like the one we teach in JNU. For example, in Europe, in the name of family, they primarily study nuclear families and households, where a legally married or religiously sanctioned, relationship between husband and wife and their biological children is called family. But is it sufficient to study the Nayar's Tarawad in Kerala? No. Because in the Nayar's Tarawad in Kerala, which is almost, a thing of the past. The real Tarabad or the traditional Tarabad does not exist in Kerala today, in 21st century. But it had been studied in 20th century, both in the earlier decades and later decades. What is Tarabad? It is a Hindu family of matrilineal descent. Matrilineal descents where mothers, their sisters, their mothers and sisters and their daughters live. In Nayar family, there is no concept of father. When Kathleen Goff studied the Malayali Tarabad, and she said that in American culture or Western culture, family is a place where children live with their mother and father. Students have started laughing. Madam, you must be joking. What is the role of a father in a family? Then she asked, do you never met your fathers? The young children said, no, we have not even seen our fathers. What does it mean? What does it mean? If you follow the positivist method of doing fieldwork by using a technique called social survey, by using the conceptual kit or conceptual tool called questionnaire, formal interviews, photography, you will not be able to understand the finer nuances of meaning expressed by the term family. Why? It is not a difference between two languages, Malayalam and English. It is a difference between two languages of family and kinship. Now take another example. Not today, but in 1980s, late 1980s, when I was doing my fieldwork. And asked my respondents, what is pizza 1980s in Madhya Pradesh? They said, I do not know. Then my supervisor, PhD supervisor, her name is Patricia Oberoi. She is a Catholic from Australia, married to a Sikh gentleman, JPS Oberoi. She said, you do not know what is pizza? You have never eaten pizza? They said, no, we have not eaten pizza. But have you eaten sarson ka saag? Patricia said, no. Have you eaten imli ka chutney? No. Do you know how to make kadhi? What does it mean? Every culture speaks in its own language. Every culture speaks in its own language. And that language is not the language called English or Hindi or Sanskrit or French or Portuguese or whatever. What are these? These are, uh, languages of very inferior quality. No scholarship is capable of expressing profound thoughts and feelings through these languages of communication. Then, what are the finer languages through which profound ideas and thoughts can be expressed? One such language is mathematics. Through mathematics, you can express profound truths and realities of physics, chemistry, biology, geology, astrophysics, and many other things. Then, music and dance. Music and dance are as universal, superior medium of communication as mathematics is. But is it everything? No. There is also the language of traffic signal. And the traffic signal is not universal. For example, the traffic rules in United States of America and India is polar opposite. Where the driver sits in US, on the front row, which side? Not right as in India, but in left. Therefore, this concept of left and right is not as easy as it is understood in common parlance in any country. What is left in JNU campus? In JNU campus, left is usually considered as somebody who is an opponent of capitalism and who is, talking about some sort of socialism, if not communism. But this is not the concept of left and right in India. In India, for example, in Hindu marriage rituals, left is considered feminine. Therefore, the wife usually sits during rituals in the left side of her husband. But what happens when they are being married? This is the situation after marriage, that the wife will represent the left and the husband will represent the right. But what happens during the ritual of marriage? Before marriage, the girl or the bride sits in the right and the husband sits in the left. You can also refer to my book, Symbols of Kinship Identity in North Indian Village. But then there are two other books which are terribly important and complementary to these books. And one book is Dangerous Wives and Sacred Sisters by Lynn Bennett. Dangerous Wives and Sacred Sisters by Lynn Bennett. And Valentine Daniel, Fluid Sign. These three books together give an understanding of Hindu culture, not Indian culture, Hindu culture in the idiom of rituals. And then you have a totally contradictory book written by the French sociologist Louis Dumont called Homo Hierarchicus. Now, in that book, Louis Dumont said that man is pure and women are impure, Brahmin is pure and the Dalit is impure, something like this. And then you have another critique by Nicholas Dirks, Castes of Mind. Castes of Mind. It is a critique of Louis Dumont. And then you have T.N. Madan's work, Non-Renunciation. Non-Renunciation. What is renunciation? Renunciation is a process through which an ordinary Hindu becomes a monk. And Louis Dumont said that, following Max Weber, that Indian culture is dominated by the Hindu culture, and Hindu culture is basically otherworldly. The Hindu culture or Indian culture, according to Louis Dumont and Max Weber, they follow otherworldly asceticism. Otherworldly asceticism. T.N. Madan says no. T.N. Madan said no. D.P. Chattopadhyay said no. Sri Aurobindo said no. B.R. Ambedkar said no. There are multiple ideologies in Indian society. There are multiple ideologies in Hindu society. And this otherworldly asceticism is one of the ideologies through which the whole of Hindu culture or Indian culture cannot be understood. Therefore, religious ritual or sacred literature cannot be the foundation of studying Indian culture systematically, holistically, scientifically. According to T.N. Madan, instead of studying sacred literature or religious literature, a good sociologist should concentrate on non-religious literature like novels, plays, and cinemas. Secondly, there was another sociologist, his name was Gopal Sadasiv Ghurye or G.S. Ghurye, who used to say that, the Indian culture is more this worldly than any other culture on earth. This he wrote later on, but most people read only his first book, Caste and Race in India. But when he is writing about Hindu sadhus or Indian sadhus, when he is writing about the religious mythology, then he discusses that the economics of religion is as much important as ascetic dimension of religion. There is a sound economic foundation to any religion. This he writes in a book called Religious Consciousness. This is a comparative analysis of world civilizations. And then he said that the root of Indian civilization had been the network of cities and not the villages, as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi has been asserting that the real culture of India is found in the villages. Ghurye said that the first phase of Indian civilization is represented by Sindhu Valley civilization, and they quote archaeological excavation reports of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, both in Pakistan now, Kalibanga, and other places. Therefore, unlike the evolutionary, pattern of development in Europe from village to town to metropolis, we have a different type of network of cities and villages in Indic civilization. The first phase is represented by urban civilization, and then comes the so-called Vedic age, centered around the villages. This is the view of G.S. Ghurye. Now, why he writes like this? There are two reasons. One is archaeological and the other is linguistic. He said that South Indian language Tamil, which is the mother of Telugu, Tulu, Malayali, and Kannada languages as well. Tamil is the oldest language of India, not Sanskrit, which is the mother of all North Indian languages. Are you getting the point? And then Ghurye said that you should not miss the point that North Indian culture or so-called Aryan culture. What is meant by Aryan here? Aryan is a family of languages. Aryan is a language of family, and Dravidian is also a language of family. These are not races, and the British authors tried to assert. And today we have very fine historiography by T.R. Troutman on Aryans. We have very fine historiography by Romila Thapa. We have very fine historiography by Ramila Sharma. We have very fine ethnography by D.D. Gosambi, which says that the Himalayas and the river Ganges, which is the daughter of Himalaya, is a very, very later development of Indic civilization. Whereas, other mountain ranges like Western Ghats Eastern Ghats or Aravalis are much older. As a result, you find much more earthquakes in North India than in Deccan Plateau or Konkan. Are you getting the point? Therefore, the study of culture requires your expertise in many techniques, and the contemporary understanding in 2021 is that culture cannot be studied by one discipline alone. Properly, it can be understood by a group of researchers coming from different disciplinary genealogy. Are you getting the point? Therefore, a study of culture or modes of cultural analysis is not truly sociology of culture. Sociology of culture is a branch of sociology, whereas this course, modes of cultural analysis, is rooted in different techniques borrowed from different disciplines. And it gives you, empowers you technically, methodically, theoretically to understand the cultural world around you better than those who are not well versed with this course. Therefore, it is logical there that almost everywhere there will be lesser number of students in this course than in other courses which I taught, like cinema and culture in India. Cinema and culture in India was not a very technical course, it was a popular course, and this course was developed to complement my expertise in theory. But this course is a very technical course. Very technical course. But these techniques are very easy to master because it is less rooted in academia than the praxis of culture or practice of culture. Praxis is your academic behavior in practice in a particular field situation. Instead of theory, it used operational theory, operational methods, operational techniques. It is like cooking. Cooking is a very technical discipline, but the colonial ideology of India does not value it. As a result, the work of housemakers is not measured in terms of money, whereas your work in office and factory is measured in terms of money. Rearing of children, socializing a child is a technical game. But it is not valued in contemporary Indian culture. As a result, I have seen in a particular middle class family, both parents will work. Both parents will work. What for? To get more money so that their children go to a better school, and a better school will ensure a better, occupational future. But what is the scientific understanding today? what is the scientific understanding today. The scientific understanding today is that you can teach a child only during the 9 months a child is in the womb of the mother, and to a lesser extent until the child is 4 years old. Only this is education. Only this is real education. Once the child is more than 4 years old, 4 years, 3 months, and the child has a mind of Isaac Newton, and the teacher is like Albert Einstein, they can add only 10% of knowledge. 90% of human brain is already developed until the child is 4 years old. Here lies inequality. Here lies inequality, reproduction of inequality. Are you getting the point? Even today in England, even today in 2021, when England is a poor country after Brexit, the highest salary is given to a primary school teacher and not to the university teacher. The best mind of England goes in nursery teaching, primary teaching, and not in the college teaching or university teaching. But what happens in the colonies of England? The best brain goes to teach in universities and research institutes. And what happens in India until very recently, the best student will opt for civil services or army. The second best will go for elite sports like billiards, polo. Then comes engineering, medicine, and management. Then comes commerce. Then comes physics, chemistry, mathematics. Then comes economics. Then comes foreign languages. I have no delusion who comes to sociology, who comes to history, who comes to political science, who comes to sociology, the leftover. Read Archaeology of Knowledge by Michel Foucault. In books after books, Michel Foucault has been dealing with the interlinkage between knowledge and power. Now the question is how to understand this. Marx will not help you much. In Das Kapital, his major work, or a critique to the political economy, there is not much to teach you about the empowerment of a child in the mother's womb, or when the child is 3 years old or 2 years old or 1 year old. Usually, when the children go to school in India, when they are around 5 years, in some of the so-called convents, you go to school, nursery school basically, nursery, kindergarten, and then LKG. when you are 3.5 years old or 4 years old. But who teaches you there? Who looks after you there in the school? They are not even teachers. They are ayahs. Ayahs, maid servants in the school. How to understand this? To understand this reproduction of inequality, Marx, Weber, and Durkheim, all three are very dated, not very relevant. Although Durkheim wrote a lot about moral education, but it is at the level of philosophy, it is at the level of grand theory, or it is at the level of micro theory, empirical study. There is no middle ground theory of education of a child in the mother's womb or before 4 years in Durkheim. It developed only after the emergence of structuralism, and it was refined in the period called post-structuralism. Therefore, today we will try to understand the difference between a structural study of culture and post-structural study of culture. What is the basic difference between structuralism and post-structuralism, or between Durkheim, Lévi-Strauss, and Michel Foucault or Barthes? In Durkheim, you have grand theory, you have grand method, you have grand technique. What happens when Lévi-Strauss comes in? He retains the grand theory of Durkheim. But he develops another method of study and refines more sophisticated techniques of doing fieldwork and interpretation of data. Are you getting the point? In other words, Claude Lévi-Strauss revolted against the method and technique of Durkheim or the founding fathers. But there is no revolt to the theory of Durkheim. Post-structuralists say that theory should be also demolished. Grand theory should be also demolished. I am giving you one example from the writer whose book I had shown in the first class, Roland Barthes, Mythology, I showed you. But he has other books as well. Now, let us take the concept of social structure or social function. What is social function in Durkheim? What is the social function of culture? What is the social function of education of the mother when she is pregnant? It is a process, a structure, process, function. A structure, process, function. In Marx, there is a structure and there is function. But there is no process. In Weber, there is process and function but no structure. Are you getting or not getting? I am not referring to a structure of social action, because the actor is always the individual, not the society. What is social according to Max Weber? Any individual action which has a subjective meaning. What is social? Any individual action which has a subjective meaning. There is no concept of social structure in Max Weber. There is no social formation as in Marx. There is no social solidarity as in Durkheim. What is there in place of social structure in Max Weber? Market. People act in the market. Are you getting the point? In place of society or social structure, as in Marx and Durkheim, in Weber you have a market. Therefore, Weberian sociology is not relevant to a study marketless society. Now, what is market? Market is a very developed institution of exchange of goods and services. It is not a place called hut or bazaar. In tribal villages, you find hut, weekly hut, or weekly market, where vendors, people who sell their labor, who exchange their goods and services, they gather at a particular point in the village, and then they disappear for 6 days, and on 7th day they again gather. This is not market in the Weberian sense of the term. What it is like going in a church on Sunday. The traditional substitute of market is modeled around the temple called the church. Are you getting the point? Traditional hut or bazaar, the Indian terms for market, are an element of social structure in India. What is the whole in communist China or earlier Soviet Union, where everything human can be studied? It was communist state. What is the whole in Emile Durkheim, of which even a state and market is a part and an element? It is social solidarity. Are you getting the point? But this social solidarity, according to Emile Durkheim, is a social fact which can be empirically studied on the ground. But according to Levi-Strauss, social structure is invisible. It is in the mind of the society. It is the subconscious or unconscious mind of society, which is represented by social institutions at the surface structural level. Therefore, in Durkheim and Marx, you have one concept of a structure, and that is infrastructure and superstructure. Superstructure is secondary structure. What is primary structure? The structure of the political economy, the structure of the modes of production. And what is modes of production? It includes forces of productions and relations of productions. But in Marx, primarily, they are talking about material goods, material production in the factory. Levi-Strauss said, what about production of reproduction? What about production of reproduction? What about production of intimacy and hatred? Can you understand the structure of Indian economy or the structure of union budget in India or Pakistan without referring to the hatred between the two countries and the huge expenditure on army and armaments? No, you cannot. Levi-Strauss said that in mechanical solidarity, in traditional society, temple was sacred. In modern society, army is sacred. In no country, army expenditure can be discussed. It is a matter of internal and external security. It is a sacred subject. It cannot be discussed democratically. Everything else can be discussed. But you cannot discuss the question of army in India or Pakistan, in China or Russia, in Saudi Arabia or Israel, in South Africa or United States of America. Are you getting the point? He said that the sacred is only transferred from the notebook and pen to the mobile. Are you getting the point? Instead of writing in the notebook, you now write on the tablet or the laptop or the computer or the mobile. But how do you write? Writing is always governed by grammar. And what is grammar? A system of rules and regulations. A system of norms and values. Are you getting or you are not getting? Therefore, there are two concepts in Claude Lévi-Strauss. I will discuss all these concepts in greater detail. I am just introducing my subject today. And official time is up, but some of you told me that I can go up to 2. Of course, anybody is free to leave anytime. But you are not free to join anytime. You have to join in time, but you can leave anytime. Is it liberty? No. At surface value, it looks like liberty. But at deeper structural level, it is a test of your discipline, patience. Unless and until you have patience, you cannot study science. You are good for common sense. Are you getting my point or not getting my point? I have a friend who is still alive, although he retired. He took voluntary retirement from our center. We both have studied in Delhi School of Economics. And then we came to JNU and worked under the same teacher. We are very good friends because we fight. I read a seminar paper in 1986 and said that in case husband and wives are not fighting within 15 days, it means something is seriously wrong. Fighting is natural. Difference of opinion is natural. Not fighting is unnatural. Who said this? Louis A. Koger. Louis A. Koger. The name of the book is Social Function of Conflict. Social Function of Conflict. And what is my example, which I have been giving semester after semester? Most of you fall in love, whereas Indians write in love. What is the difference between falling in love and writing in love? When you write in love, you are married to an equal. And he or she will not agree with 99% of your things. And in case you know how to transcend these 99% differences and disagreements, then you become a transcendental person. You write in love. The institution of marriage in India is a very worldly thing, you know. It is very worldly. What is more worldly than sex or food? But what is sex? There is one answer which is given by psychologists like Sigmund Freud. And there is another answer which is given by Bronisław Malinowski. And the name of the books are I remember the name, but I do not remember the year of publication. Bronisław Malinowski wrote his first book in 1913, although it is not very popular among sociologists, The Family Among the Australian Aborigines. This is the same tribe which was studied by Emile Durkheim in the book The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. But he is primarily known for his second book, which was published in 1922, 100 years ago. This is 2021. The book was published in 1922. 100 years have passed, and this book is still very relevant. Argonauts of the Western Pacific. And then he wrote his third book, The Myth in Primitive Psychology. In this book, he had refuted or falsified all psychological theories of Freud and Jung and Adler and Sudhir Kakkar and many others. Then in 1926, he wrote a book, Crime and Custom in Savage Society. Then he wrote in 1927, Sex and Repression in Savage Society. Then in 1929, he wrote about the sexual life of savages in northwestern Melanesia. Then in 1935, he wrote about the coral gardens and their magic. In 1944, he wrote A Scientific Theory of Culture, which is a mandatory reading for all of you. In 1948, his book Magic, Science and Religion was published. And then in 1962, he comes with a book called Sex, Culture and Myth. And then in 1947, there was a book, Freedom and Civilization. And in 1946, The Dynamics of Culture. And last, in 1967, A Diary in the strict sense of the term. This is the last book, A Diary in the strict sense of the term, which is the foundation of all academic diaries written by sociologists and anthropologists the world over. Therefore, although he wrote about substantive theory or empirical theory of human life in different continents, but he is primarily known for 5 things. First, he systematized the canons of participant observation in his second book, Argonauts of the Western Pacific, primarily in the introduction. There is no other book until now which has surpassed or refined even one sentence of Malinowski about participant observation. Second, he wrote very honest academic diary when he was doing field work among the Trobians. Third, he was the first sociologist who claimed that culture can be studied independent of social structure or social formation or political economy. And fifth, he delineated different themes which must be studied within the sociology of culture. And these are, as the title of the books claim, reciprocity and exchange, reciprocity and exchange, and the mediums of these exchange. Participant observation. By participant observation, he meant primarily three things. Number one, you will not study your own culture. You have to study others' culture. Why? Because when you are studying your own culture, there is a high probability of prejudice and bias. Therefore, to understand your own culture, you must study another's culture, and then you should compare and contrast. When you are comparing your own culture, which you are living as a human being, and the other culture which you are studying as an academician, then you are in a better position to evolve as a human being. And what are the requirements of participant observation? Number one, you have to learn a new language spoken by your respondents in the other culture. Therefore, it is mandatory to know at least one more language when you are being trained in sociology. Now, I think, the spark in Riyadh eyes yesterday was, or last class was, how do you know 16 languages? It is mandatory to study any culture through their language, their idiom. Are you getting the point? Learning a new language is mandatory for the degree of PhD. How many JNU students or Indian students learn a new language during their PhD? None. Why I am saying none? Because the total is less than 1%. 0.07%. Second criteria to do participant observation is that you will live your, full life during your field work. You will live your complete life among your respondents. Suppose you have to study a slum. You have to live in a slum for as many time as you are studying them. What most sociologists do, including some of you, you stay in a hotel in the urban space, and then you take your vehicle, hired or whatever, and then you go in the slum or the village. Are you getting the point? Once you are not living with them, once you are not eating with them, they will not disclose their secrets, their codes of culture. Then they will treat you as the other. Malinowski said, studying another person's culture is difficult. It is possible only when you know their language. Otherwise, what happens? Suppose, Dipti should not mind, I have many students from Kerala and Assam. and also Manipur. But they are from different backgrounds. Almost 20 years ago, I visited to do a fieldwork in Assam. And my student was my research assistant. And then I was not doing Assamese. And what he was doing? He was talking to the, respondents in Assamese language, and then he was translating it to me. Although the respondent knew Hindi, if not English, there was a possibility of speaking in Hindi as a common language. Hindi is not the proper word, Hindustani, half Urdu and half Hindi. But instead of speaking in Hindustani, he decided to speak in Assamia. And in Assam, they speak Assamia in 6 ways. Accent is different. In Kerala, they speak Malayalam in 3 ways. In Bihar, they speak Hindi in 8 ways. In Bengal, they speak Bengali in 5 ways. Therefore, Levi-Strauss said, you must differentiate between lang and parole. What is lang? Language. Parole is speech. And Basil Bernstein has done a very marvelous fieldwork for the study of parole or speech. He said that when he was doing a fieldwork in Australia, people of one class were speaking in elaborate code. But when people of 2 classes were interacting, they were talking in restricted code. Unless and until you know their language, unless and until you spend the time, the complete 24 hours, 360 days or 65 days in a year with your respondents, your data will be inauthentic and bogus. And this is what has been done by 99% of sociologists in the colonies. Why? Because learning a new language in adulthood is very difficult. As a child, you can master as many languages as you want. But in poor families, this facility was not available earlier. Now it is available. Because mobile is available almost everywhere. And on most mobiles, you can listen any song in any language. Or you can self-teach you. You can become self-taught learner of a new language. But formal learning of a language is a costly affair which cannot be, sustained by normal families. Academia is an elite game. And even after reservation, inequality exists because good college and good university reserve seats for the downtrodden. But in a school, there is no reservation. In elite schools, there is no reservation unless and until there is a reservation in schools. Unless and until there is a reservation in hospitals. Inequality will persist. Inequality will persist. Now, this is fine. This is a structuralism. This is Levi-Strauss. Instead of studying the structure in the empirical context, you try to study the structure of the human mind in a particular culture. Fine. But post-structuralists say it is not fine. Why? Because the text which students are given to learn is authored by a particular person of a particular cultural background. And by a structural method, you can study multiple texts in a comparative perspective. But the need is to read the same text in multiple ways. Are you getting or not getting? With Levi-Strauss began textual study of culture. In the era of Durkheim, they were making empirical study of the culture. And during the empirical study of the culture, they were interviewing people, some people, but not everybody. And whom they were interviewing? They were interviewing only those people who are convenient to be interviewed. Are you getting the point? For example, there is a course in our center which was taught in 4th semester, but this year it is, I suppose, being taught in 2nd semester. Women and society, or gender and society. And it is mostly taught by women teacher. Then what is the point of teaching? What is the point of teaching? A woman is teaching to another woman about woman. What is so funny about it? Society is not getting any benefit. In case you want gender inequality to be eradicated, then man should be taught about woman and woman should be taught about man. This is a method which was developed by E. Evans Pritchard, a student of Bronisław Malinowski. And what is this method called? Do not compare, rather contrast. How do you study a state? He said, go in a society where there is no state. Are you getting the point? In case you are studying a state in your own country, then you are getting only information, there will be no knowledge. In case you want knowledge, then you should study a stateless society of another culture and see how order is maintained, how law is maintained without the institution of a state. Getting my point? Getting or not getting. Therefore, Evans Pritchard wrote a book about the Nuer, N-U-E-R. It is a study of a state in a stateless society called the Nuer. And then another sociologist followed this method of Evans Pritchard. His name is David Snyder. And he wrote a book in 1916. It was called American Kinship. Why he studied kinship in America? Because in America there is no kinship. He said, you cannot understand kinship of Manipur. In case you have no opportunity to study American society where there is no kinship. Suppose I have to teach cooking. I will not teach cooking to my female students. I will teach cooking to my male students. Because in most societies, cooking has been associated at home with unpaid labor. A stereotypical association of cooking with female. But have you seen any 5-star or 7-star or 9-star hotel where the cook is a female? All chefs in big hotels, costly hotels are male. In case a man can cook in a 5-star hotel, why he should not cook at home? Therefore, Roland Barthes said, Levi-Strauss taught us how to study text holistically. But his only mistake was that he was studying the text with the author of the text. Are you getting the point? Therefore, Barthes said, the author is dead. Long live the text. He was a copycat. He was copying a person called Friedrich Nietzsche. Have you heard the name? Friedrich Nietzsche, who had said in 1901, God is dead. Long live human beings. Therefore, post-structuralism is not inspired by Ferdinand Saussure, who inspired with Durkheim, Levi-Strauss to develop a structural study of culture, human mind. Usually overlooked in the discussion of theoretical foundations of fieldwork, and that is the authorship of the text in a structuralism of Claude Lévi-Strauss. We all know that Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of structural linguistics in the modern world, and Emile Durkheim, the French sociologist who are influenced by both positivism of Auguste Comte and pragmatism of Charles Saunders Peirce became the major influence of a structural anthropology developed by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Claude Lévi-Strauss is very much in the Durkheimian tradition of sociological analysis, but there is a bridge between Lévi-Strauss and Durkheim, and that is Durkheim's nephew and celebrated anthropologist and Indologist Marcel Mauss. To understand the debate between structuralism and post-structuralism, the small booklet written by Claude Lévi-Strauss on Marcel Mauss, an introduction to the works of Marcel Mauss, is terribly important. Now, as I said, Roland Barthes and other post-structurists like Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida were influenced by Lévi-Strauss, but without the influence of Ferdinand de Saussure and even Emile Durkheim. The major reason is the paradigmatic debate which was systematized by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, and all philosophers from Immanuel Kant to Hegel to Marx to Saint-Simon or Saint-Simon more or less believed that we cannot study reality as it is or noumena, and we should focus on phenomena. But then the sharp distinction between the natural scientist and the social scientist, as it emerged in the writings of Max Weber, primarily his book, The Methodology of Social Sciences, brought the question of noumena and phenomena again. Now, when Claude Lévi-Strauss was writing throughout his life, the influence of another qualitatively different type of European philosophy was becoming popular. Three people of Europe, Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, and Nietzsche, were instrumental in developing the anti-Kantian paradigm of philosophy and social sciences, And out of the three, Schopenhauer was more influential in the study of Indology, the study of aesthetics, the study of literary criticism, sociology of art. Kierkegaard was more influential in the circles associated with a new subdiscipline called existentialism, which is more notably associated with the names of Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian philosophical novelist, Jean-Paul Sartre, the French novelist and philosopher, and Simone de Beauvoir, the first systematic feminist writer who wrote the book The Second Sex. But it is Ferdinand de Saussure's view which was frontally criticized or negotiated with by Friedrich Nietzsche, that becomes important in the discussion between structuralism and post-structuralism. If we are not very careful about the philosophical foundations of French structuralism, which Claude Lévi-Strauss developed, we miss the point that the author of a cultural text, for example, Hamlet or Macbeth, written by William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not important for Lévi-Strauss. The text written by William Shakespeare, Hamlet or Macbeth, is important. But what about the authorship of the prescriber of the text for the structural analysis? It is true that Lévi-Strauss will not give too much importance to the intentions of the author of any literary or cultural text, but from post-structural point of view, the very prescription of a text for analysis by an anthropologist called Lévi-Strauss gives Lévi-Strauss some sort of metaphorical authorship. This is slightly complicated, therefore I will try to explain Nietzsche's slogan that God is dead, long live the human beings. Now, is the God of Nietzsche the same God which is the God of Immanuel Durkheim? The answer is no. when Nietzsche said God is dead, he was referring to the Semitic God, the Christian God. He was referring to the phenomenal God. He was not referring to the nominal God. By dramatically underlying the death of God, Nietzsche is not murdering the nominal God. He is not claiming that nominal God is dead. He is only claiming that if phenomenology is Immanuel Kant is taken too seriously, then there is no possibility of any Christian God or phenomenal God to be taken seriously. What Nietzsche is trying to say? He is trying to say that phenomenology of Immanuel Kant is not his original discovery, rather Kantian assertion is in tune with, in line with the Christianity of Western Europe, the phenomenology of Christianity. It is more or less the same argument which Auguste Comte was making, that sociology is secular theology. The post-structuralists like Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault are trying to say that phenomenology of Immanuel Kant became so popular in Europe because even after Reformation, the Christian God, who is a phenomenological construction by Saint Peter and Saint Paul, was influential because after Reformation there was counter-reformation, and since we do not talk much about the counter-reformation, we do not understand the academic constituency of Immanuel Kant. Why Kant became the most important philosopher in 18th century of Europe? Because then European Enlightenment was a common paradigm of Europe which was acceptable to both the reformist and the counter-reformist. There was disagreement over the authority of the Pope, but there was no dispute about the authority of Jesus Christ as the only Son of God, the Father. Actually, Nietzsche is trying to renegotiate this primacy of epistemology over ontology. He is trying to say that Kantian phenomenology is not ontology. This is not a theory of reality as it is. Rather, it is a theory of method. It is epistemology. This is a theory of knowledge. Nietzsche is trying to say that Immanuel Kant should not be regarded as the most important European philosopher unless and until we are ready to concede the common ground between the reformist and the counter-reformist. Therefore, Roland Barthes is trying to re-articulate the argument of the Nietzsche that although at surface structure, the author is not taken into account in structural anthropology, but at deeper structure, the author of the text remains the legacy of Peter and Paul, and that is not acceptable in a multicultural world, in a multipolar world of 1968-69, when the Warsaw Pact, led by the Soviet Union and the NATO countries, led by the United States of America, are fighting over for the control of the social order manufactured by the end of the Second World War. It is in this context that the Kantian consensus is being challenged by the post-structuralists as untenable. And they are saying that in a structural analysis of myth and culture in Claude Lévi-Strauss, the author is, a towering personality. And who is that author? The author of the culture, the author of the notion of culture and civilization, the Christian fathers who defined the cultural process, the civilizing process, is paradigmatic to the grammar of cultures which is being discussed, which is being analyzed by Claude Lévi-Strauss by following the formula of structural linguistics provided by Ferdinand de Saussure. Barthes and Foucault in particular, but also all the structuralists in general, they are trying to make 3 points. Number one, the Christian concept of God is no more relevant, and we should operate with a more neutral concept of God developed by Emile Durkheim. We should not continue to take Rudolf Otto's concept of the holy God that is outdated, that was good for the colonial world from 18th century to 20th century. In late 20th century, after the 1968-69, after the birth of postmodernism, the concept of God cannot be the Christian God. The concept of culture cannot be the Christian concept of culture, which is in circulation even after the Reformation and Enlightenment. They are trying to argue the same thing which is being argued by Mackie Marriott in the book Ethno-Sociology through Hindu categories, which is being argued by J.P. Subera in India, that for Europe, the national and international is one and the same thing, but for non-Europeans, national and international are quite different things. It is also the case with Islamic scholars who are active in social science. In case we have to make sociology or anthropology as a universal science of culture and society, then the text should be read without the Christian authorship of the modern editions of any cultural text, because there has been politics of translation and also politics of publication with the hidden authorship of the editor of the text. Then the text should be also read from different perspectives. The same text should be read from different perspectives. For example, the Bible or the Quran should be read from the non-Semitic perspective as well as from feminist perspective or subaltern perspective. In the same way, other texts should be read. Therefore, there are three slogans which are central to research agenda of the post-structuralist. Number one, the author is dead, long live the text. Second, the text is dead, long live the reader. And third, let us be ready for multiple theoretical universes of cultural discourse. There is no need to have one meta theory, one macro theory of culture for the whole globe, for the whole global village. There can be a structurally homologous theory of cultures. There can be multiple theories of cultures, multiple methodology of cultures, multiple techniques of cultures, and there should be a freedom to the researcher to use a particular theory, a particular technique, a particular method to suit his or her cultural universe, so that the study of culture becomes an empowering process and an enriching process for the researcher as well as the readers of the text prepared by the researcher. Thank you.